听专家解读美国升学方案，看美国学习生活点滴，圆美国名校梦想。本节目由美国文美教育集团冠名播出。
大家好，欢迎收看文美集团美国升学直通车。文美集团美国升学直通车是华人网和文美教育集团联合制作播出的北美首档大型的网络直播教育节目。在我们的节目当中，你将会了解到最新最权威的教育资讯，还有升学的建议。无论你是学生还是家长，有任何的美国升学教育问题，都可以给我们留言。首先来介绍一下文美集团。美国文美集团，美国大学申请规划服务第一品牌，20年经验，万博士领衔常春藤顾问团队，中美双顾问模式服务一个学生，按照大学录取学校排名收费，与孩子形成利益共同体。华人老品牌，值得您的信赖。文美集团隆重推出 ACAP 大学专业及职业测评规划管理系统，华人升学机构首创，完美解决华人学生最大升学痛点。人工智能提前锁定大学专业方向，提前2到5年布局申请。有了专业测评系统，孩子的课程规划更清晰，活动更聚焦，文书更有故事感，大学申请更有竞争力。5到11年级学生都可以报名参加测评。文美集团1对1非营利组织成立运营领导力项目，让孩子从参与者变为领导者，真正成长、成人、成才进名校。5到11年级学生均可报名参加。文美集团社会影响力联合国网络义工课程，节省孩子时间，做名校认可的社会影响力，高大上义工。5到11年级学生均可报名参加。今天我们邀请到前康奈尔大学的面试官，同时呢也是文美集团的顾问 Mr. Pierre 来和我们聊聊想进哈佛、MIT、斯坦福的孩子需要具备的5个特征。有请 Mr. Pierre。Hi,
this is Pierre Rodriguez for WenMei.Today's topic is going to be building a competitive student profile. As you know, I am an admissions counselor and I also do SAT prep for WenMei. This topic is going to be far too long to condense into a 20 to 30 minute video. It is definitely something that a lot of people ask about. It's essentially going to sit at the heart of admissions counseling.In a condensed manner. So we will cover as much as we can, but really there is a lot more that we could mention. So our focus is going to be on top 20 or T20 universities. So that means the top 20 schools based on rankings. In recent years, the admissions landscape at the nation's most selective colleges have become extremely competitive.This is something we talked about in the first video. Acceptance rates are now often below 5%. For example, Harvard admitted only 2,003 applicants of 47,893, so about 4.2% for the class of 2029. Likewise, MIT admitted just 1,334 out of 29,281 applicants for an acceptance rate of 4.6%. And likewise, Stanford was about 3.6% for the class of 2028. This trend is driven by soaring application volumes and virtually fixed class sizes. In other words, more and more people are applying, but the number of seats is fixed.In response, many top colleges have adjusted policies, for example, requiring SAT, ACT scores, again, for future entering classes. This is also something we talked about in the previous video. And renewed emphasis on holistic review. However, the focus for today is building a competitive profile. So that means maximizing every single part of the application. Academic rigor, high GPA, strong test scores when required,deep extracurricular commitments, impactful essays, and smart application strategy. For example, having a strong college list, considering things like early decision, early action, if available, excellent recommendations, etc. Throughout this presentation, we will break down the key components: academics, testing, activities, and applications, and offer concrete, actionable advice We will also share insider secrets about how admissions offices work. So the topics that we will attempt to cover, although, as I said, it's impossible to cover all of them: academic foundation, standardized testing strategy, extracurricular strategy, application strategy, essays and narrative, which we covered in a previous video, timeline and roadmap, insider secrets, and then case studies as examples. So for academic foundation, this means course rigor, so AP, IB, dual enrollment, GPA, and class rank, STEM and versus humanities balance. For standardized testing strategy, this means the evolving test optional landscape and how to navigate it for top schools. Many are now reinstating testing requirements. Extracurricular strategy, depth versus breadth. In other words, going and doing something really deeply, in other words, for like 4 years versus having a solid mix of various activities, various interests. Leadership, research and internships, arts and athletics, community impact. Application strategy, constructing a balanced college list, early action, early decision, demonstrating interest, and strong recommendations. Essays and narrative, crafting personal statements that convey a clear story, including specific details and reflections, like we mentioned before. Timeline and roadmap, a grade-by-grade guide and timeline of key milestones shown below. Insider secrets, a deep dive into how hard to find insights, for example, yield management, wait lists, legacy athletes, impacts the admissions process. And finally, case studies, hypothetical student profiles illustrating how to apply these strategies in practice. In the future, we'll consider using actual student case studies. These are hypothetical, but through things such as stats and ECs, posts on admissions pages, for example, on Reddit, we can get a unique insight into the actual mix of extracurriculars and academics that it takes to get accepted into these elite universities. So throughout, we will reference up-to-date data and official guidance from Harvard, MIT, Stanford, and other top 20 universities, using resources such as official admissions websites, common data sets, and reputable media. At the end, we give specific next steps and resources. So we can start with what makes a competitive profile. A competitive profile for top 20 admissions combines excellence in academics with demonstrated passion and leadership out of the classroom. No single factor guarantees admission. Colleges use holistic review. Top candidates excel academically. They have near perfect grades and the most rigorous curriculum their school offers. So they're going to take the most advanced courses and go beyond that and go ahead and take, for instance, dual enrollment courses. And they tend to also stand out with meaningful achievements in one or more areas. In broad strokes, academic and coursework. So they will have a near 4.0 GPA, almost all A's, and a transcript full of honors, AP, IB, or other advanced courses in core subjects. Elite colleges typically expect top students to take the hardest classes available. For example, MIT explicitly requires all students to learn calculus and physics at an advanced level. So that would be AP Calculus BC and AP Physics C, Mechanics, and E&M, which is calculus-based physics. And research from admissions offices shows that test scores and math ability remain strong predictors of success in STEM-heavy curricula. In practice, most admits at Ivy, Caltech, Stanford have completed multiple AP IB courses, often in the range of 5 to 10 plus, in math, science, and humanities. While more than 6 APs may not dramatically improve college performance, not taking them can make a student look under-challenged. Testing. For many top schools, SAT, ACT scores now matter again. So we talked about this previously. When required, a competitive applicant should aim for scores in or above the 75th percentile for the admits. For instance, Brown's admitted class had SAT 50% range of 1480 to 1560, and MIT's was roughly 1520 to 1580. Extracurricular portfolio. Deep, sustained involvement is key. Rather than dozens of fleeting activities, admissions officers look for leadership and impact in a few areas. So this is also why we have the leadership program at WinMay to help students develop those skills. Top students often captain sports teams, direct plays, run clubs, or serve in local government. Many also engage in research or internships, common in STEM and top school feeder programs. Elite feeder high schools emphasize this. For example, students there often complete independent research or mentorship projects by senior year. So again, at WinMay, we offer a research program to give students the opportunity to do research with professors at top universities. We will also discuss strategies for choosing and highlighting activities, but in general, quality is greater than quantity. For example, a multi-year research project or award is more memorable than generic club memberships. Essays and personal narrative we have discussed in a previous video, so I'll go ahead and move on from that, but the idea is to tell your story, your unique story that only you could tell. Other factors. Strong letters of recommendation, particularly from teachers who know the student well in core subjects, and demonstrated interest, visits, reviews, interviews, communications with the college that you're interested in can also play roles. First generation status, socioeconomic background, or special talents can influence context. Many top schools rank applicants in terms of they're going to be tracking in terms of their backgrounds to build diverse classes. For example, Harvard reports that about 21% of its students are Pell eligible, reflecting attention to socioeconomic diversity. No magic bullet exists. It's the combination that's counting here. A balanced profile will be pairing a rigorous academic record with meaningful off-campus contributions. The rest of this presentation breaks down how to build each component. So now we're going to go into the next section. Academic foundation, GPA, rigor, and courses. So these are the fundamentals. So a rigorous curriculum. Admissions offices want to see that you've taken full advantage of your school's curriculum. Top colleges expect the most challenging course loads possible: honors, advanced placement, international, baccalaureate, or dual enrollment. If your school offers AP Calculus, AP Physics, AP Chemistry, AP Literature, top applicants typically take many of them. Colleges will know how your course load compares to peers via school profiles and counselor reports. Even in high school, one can tailor curriculum. Feeder programs often plan sequences of math and science classes through multivariable calculus or lab research courses. We also emphasize course planning. In fact, that is something that we do early on, and we extrapolate all the way to senior year for every single subject. So we take course planning very seriously at WinMay. Of course, that is something that is tentative. It's subject to change depending on the trajectory that the student ends up following. Either way, I think it's important to have a sense of direction and also to kind of assess how far you'll be able to go in terms of the level of the coursework that you're going to be doing, and look for ways to challenge yourself beyond that. So advanced placement versus dual enrollment. So this is a big topic here. The academic trend at elite colleges is to prefer AP IB over dual enrollment for admissions credit because AP IB standardized rigor across schools. In general, taking advanced courses in any form helps, but at least 6+ AP or IB classes in varying subjects is common among top applicants. So that means that the students that are applying to these schools typically have at the very least 6 APs in pretty much the most difficult subjects. I usually recommend to have about 10, right? We want to create a cushion. We want to be even more competitive. And, not all APs are created equal. Some are easier than others. So you want to balance, taking some more difficult ones with some easier ones. So that way you can maximize how many you can take. We also tell students about taking them online, for instance, through UC Scout, especially if their school doesn't offer any AP classes. Next section is grades and GPA. So aim for straight A's. The common data sets for top universities typically show that 80 to 95% of admitted students were in the top decile of their class. So that means that they almost had nearly 4.0 GPAs. For example, Brown reports 95% of its class of 2029 were in the top 10% in high school. If you ever have a setback, for example, a C or a low A, make sure it's an outlier. Focus on consistent excellence. Colleges will recalculate your GPA on a 4.0 unweighted scale and note rigor flags, how many advanced courses you took. Core subjects. Emphasize a STEM humanities mix that aligns with your interests. If applying to engineering or physical science, advanced math and science courses and related projects are crucial. MIT's admissions research emphasizes that in their curriculum necessitates strong math preparation. If interested in humanities, fill up on AP English language, history, and foreign languages, and writing opportunities. Also pursue breadth. Top colleges still expect a strong foundation in all core areas: math, science, English, social studies, foreign language, and often the arts. And then finally, grades and context. Remember that grades are interpreted in context. A 3.0 GPA at a notoriously competitive school can be even more impressive than a 4.0 at a less rigorous school. Include rank or the strength of your transcript. Okay, college preparatory curriculum. So for example, we think about research admissions as showing that admitted students for these T20 schools often complete things like AP Calculus A, B, or BC, AP Physics, AP Chemistry or Biology, AP Statistics, AP Literature, AP History, AP World History, multiple foreign languages, which we also emphasize students to do at wenme. Honors, English, math each year, for example. Even if your school doesn't offer APs, taking math through at least multivariable calculus and science through advanced electives, for example, science research, engineering projects signals rigor. So the rigor is really, really important. They want to make sure that you challenge yourself as much as possible because that's going to show more of what your potential is going to be at the actual university. In fact, part of what makes top feeder schools so successful, in other words, schools that routinely place students into the top 20 schools, including schools like MIT, Stanford, and the Ivies, is their curriculum, the rigor of their curriculum. So they offer advanced courses that are typically not going to be found at other colleges and other high schools per se. So in the end, the key takeaway here is challenge yourself with the hardest courses possible every year. Use summer programs, math camps, research internships, coding camps to further deepen your expertise and show initiative. Top feeder high schools often require a research or capstone project by junior or senior year. If your school doesn't, seek one yourself. For example, find a science engineering research mentor or an art apprenticeship. So for standardized testing strategy, there is a lot to say here, but I'll just mostly say that, as we talked about previously, schools are going back to reinstating testing requirements. So I'm looking at Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Yale, Brown, Dartmouth, Penn, Cornell, Columbia, Princeton. Almost all of them are requiring SATs by now, especially for the upcoming cycle, the 2026 to 2027 cycle. And so that means that testing is really, really important. Okay. So if you take the SAT or ACT, aim for the 75th percentile of admitted students at your target schools. So for reference, let's say Brown University admitted students that were in the 1480 to 1560 range. And MIT's, they had an English score between 740 to 780 and a math score between 780 to 800. Use College Board's Khan Academy or ACT free practice. Of course, at WinMay, we also offer SAT prep. And the advantage there, the value there is that we give you the patterns up front instead of you having to go through hundreds and thousands potentially of number of questions to figure out patterns and generalize. We give you those up front, so we accelerate the learning curve essentially. And we also provide the best resources possible. If you decide to test optional, we're allowed to know that a high score can still boost an application. So for test optional, you can obviously choose to report your score. And something, as I've said before, at WinMay we do is we tell students to go ahead and go for it, take the test. And if they do get a competitive score, to include it on their application, because that can only help their chances. And some studies have found that including a strong test score can help identify underrepresented talent. Plan your testing timeline carefully. Take the SAT, ACT by fall of senior year, or at the latest, make sure that you check your schedule to see if you can take the test multiple times if you need to. And for the last section, what we're going to talk about is extracurricular strategy that includes depth, leadership, and impact. So quality over quantity. It's better to have 3 to 4 activities you truly excel in than to have 20 filler clubs. Admissions officers read that iceberg of the applications once they see your core passion. So they're going to value leadership and sustained achievement, for example. So leadership as the first section. Holding a leadership role, for example, team captain, club president, editor, signals responsibility and initiative. If you start a new club, which is something that we tell students to do sometimes, or a project that lasts, it shows drive. Many students find that nonprofit or organized events or even community campaigns is also another way to demonstrate leadership. Depth and expertise. Developing real expertise sets you apart. So if you love computer science, participate in research, with the local university lab or a virtual project, or interning at a tech company can show seriousness. If you're a musician, winning competitions or composing pieces adds weight. Athletes can pursue high-level club sports or win regional titles, for instance. Research and internships. STEM-oriented studies show that at top schools, they will often have summer research, for example, working with a professor, right? For example, the WinMay program that I talked about in research. Participating in REU programs or science fair projects leading to published work. Humanities, social science students might intern at local museums, write articles, or launch podcasts. These opportunities provide concrete stories for essays and demonstrate initiative. Feeder schools frequently arrange research projects, emulate this by reaching out to teachers or local colleagues for mentoring opportunities. So in this case, that would mean reaching out to WinMay for that. Community impact. Genuine service or impact can be compelling. So for instance, initiating a tutoring program for underprivileged kids, or leading an environmental campaign that made a local change. Projects that showcase intellectual or emotional impact and reflection. For example, as we're going to see in the essay section. So breadth consideration. While depth is king, a touch of breadth helps show a well-rounded person. The most competitive students often balance STEM with arts, for example, a coding club and playing in an orchestra. So typically I see a lot of students that do have some involvement in music, and they tend to excel in academics as well, or athletes in academics. However, avoid too much spreading thinly. Finally, for portfolio arts and sports, essentially what I tell students about sports is, if you're doing sports, it can help you. If you're not doing sports, it can't hurt you. So in other words, if you are a student athlete, it's something that, if you're competitive, it can definitely help your chances. Same thing when it comes to art. Okay. Now for application strategy and essays, I'm going to focus mostly on application strategy, since in a previous video we talked about the essays. So for application strategy, we talk about college list construction. So that is something that Dr. Wan assists most students with. I also encourage students to kind of start building their own list so they can have, some idea of how a list works. Cast a wide net strategically, right? In terms of top 20 schools, categorize schools as reach, like the Ivy Plus group, match, slightly less selective, privates, public flagships. So that would be like the target schools, and safety. So solid state schools where admission is likely. So the high, backup schools. Even strong applicants usually apply to multiple reach schools. A balanced list, can be somewhere between 10 to 15 schools. That's not uncommon. Don't pull all hopes on a few Ivies. Include a mix of highly selective, moderately selective, and safe admissions. Consider geography, financial fit, and program strength as well. Now for the timing, that's another thing that's part of application strategy. So that would be early action / early decision. Applying early can boost chances. Most top 20 schools offer either early action, which is non-binding, or early decision, which is binding. Harvard has a restrictive early action admit, and usually it's been many times its regular decision rate. So in some cases you have an advantage of applying early. So for Brown's class, you have an early decision admit rate of 37.5% versus 4% overall admit rate. So obviously you have a significant advantage of applying early to Brown. So usually I provide students with a list that lists for the top 30 universities, what is the size of the early decision advantage or early action advantage, so that you can know whether it makes sense to apply early or not. The idea is to apply early when you have a sizable early action or early decision advantage, which is defined as the difference between acceptance rates when people apply early versus when they apply regular decision. If you have a clear first choice and can commit, early decision is a way to, early decisions when you're going to be what you want to use in that case. Early action still often use a higher admit rate than a regular decision. So what I usually tell students is figure out your early decision school and apply to early action for the rest of your schools if possible. If you don't get into your early decision one school for the first round, you can consider applying early decision 2, which is the second round of early decision, since the first one would not be binding you anymore. Demonstrated interest we've talked about. And what I want to talk about now is insider secrets, and then I'll go ahead and conclude. So for insider secrets, admissions yield management. So that means that a lot of students that are accepted end up enrolling. So for Harvard, that was over 83%, that yield. So why is that important? Because that's going to give you some insight in terms of, for example, if you are waitlisted, right? So that can give you some considerations in terms of what are your chances. So if a college's yield is very high, 80 to 90%, it means nearly everyone who was admitted intends to attend. Conversely, it means very few new students are admitted off the wait list. So, for example, Harvard admitted only 75 waitlist students for the class of 2029. For students, this means apply early decision if you can, because colleges will want early decision admits to enroll. But if you go regular decision, expect extremely low acceptance chances once the class is largely filled. So early decision can also be a first chance at getting into a university. If you get deferred, then you'll have a second chance, but you'll be grouped with the regular decision applicant pool. So that's the difference, which is usually going to be more competitive, of course. Now, in terms of early versus regular round, at most top schools, early decision, early action applicants have dramatically higher admit rates than regular decision. For instance, Brown, we talked about already. Cornell, also, they have adjusted this, but for instance, we have 60% versus regular decision 9%. There's going to be some adjustments for that in recent years. Schools fill a significant portion of their class in early decision, early action. If you are a strong candidate with a clear first choice, early decision can multiply your chances. If not early decision binding, still aim for early action at schools like Harvard's restrictive early action or Stanford's non-binding early action, and is often going to result in an acceptance rate that's several times higher than regular decision. So test submission in optional years. So we talked about that. Contacts and interviews. So your interviews, definitely if they're optional, if you get an invitation, consider doing them, because that can help you in the sense of providing additional insights into who you are and what you're about that would otherwise not be captured by your application. And also give you a chance to learn more about the school by talking to someone that graduated from there. Legacy and hooked applicants. So obviously legacy students has been a big deal, but I think the overall consensus on that is that it's still going on, but it's obviously to a much lesser extent than before, since it's been outlawed. So a school that maybe you could consider that would be like Harvard, for example. Final transcripts matter. So you definitely want to finish strong when it comes to your senior year. I know a lot of students want to slack off the second half of the year, but it is important to be consistent and try hard all the way through. And waitlist strategy. So in some cases, you want to go ahead and write a letter of continued interest if you get waitlisted from a university. And some schools also have school-specific requirements, so make sure that you're aware of those. For instance, Brown requires an introduction video. Okay, so in closing, I want to say that you want to focus on things like college research, okay, course planning, test prep, extracurricular strategy, essays, of course, interviews and campus visits, college list review, because that is literally going to be the set of colleges that you're looking at, right? Where you're going to be spending the next 4 years of your life potentially. So it's a big decision. So the more work you put into that, the higher quality list you're going to have, the happier you're going to be in the end, essentially. And of course, application workshops. So this is an example of something that we are providing to you so that you have more insight into the application process, especially for competitive students, right? So that is the idea. Our goal is to give you the most options available to you when it comes to once you've submitted your applications, and also provide you with the most up-to-date and current information on admissions trends and things like that. So the admissions process is daunting, but a strategic approach and authentic profile can help you set yourself apart. Focus on demonstrating excellence and personal growth. With preparation and perseverance, you'll put forward the strongest possible application. And that is what we're here for, to help you with that process. So thank you again, and take care.
感谢 Mr. Pierre 今天和我们的分享。你有任何的问题呢，都可以直接来咨询文美集团。美国文美集团，美国大学申请规划服务第一品牌，20年经验，万博士领衔常春藤顾问团队，中美双顾问模式服务1个学生，按照大学录取学校排名收费，与孩子形成利益共同体。华人老品牌，值得您的信赖。文美集团隆重推出 ACAP 大学专业及职业测评规划管理系统，华人升学机构首创，完美解决华人学生最大升学痛点。人工智能提前锁定大学专业方向，提前2到5年布局申请。有了专业测评系统，孩子的课程规划更清晰，活动更聚焦，文书更有故事感，大学申请更有竞争力。5到11年级学生都可以报名参加测评。文美集团1对1非营利组织成立运营领导力项目，让孩子从参与者变为领导者，真正成长、成人、成才进名校。5到11年级学生均可报名参加。文美集团社会影响力联合国网络义工课程，节省孩子时间，做名校认可的社会影响力，高大上义工。5到11年级学生均可报名参加。感谢大家的收看，我们下次再见。